Today on TimesCast, sources close to Pakistan's military chief say he is considering pulling back his military's cooperation with the United States. So why does the U.S. continue giving Pakistan billions of dollars in aid?
What happened to the desks?
And op-ed columnist Nicolas D. Kristof on how education can counter extremism in Pakistan. On Friday morning, more than 80 Pakistani soldiers were killed when at least one suicide bomber blew himself up at a military training center in northwest Pakistan. And while Pakistan's military casualties in the war against terrorism mount, the United States is putting increasing pressure on Pakistan's military chief, General Ashfaq Parvez Kayani, to do more.
As head of the Pakistani Army, General Kayani is the most powerful man in Pakistan. He's had a complicated relationship with the United States in the last 3 years. He's been courted assiduously by top American military officials, General Petraeus, who have tried to persuade the general that it's in Pakistan's best interest, and of course in American best interest, that he turn on a group of militants who are holed up in North Waziristan. They're known as the Afghan Taliban or the Haqqani Network. And these militants cross into Afghanistan and kill American and NATO soldiers in the war there. The Americans have been singularly unsuccessful in persuading General Kayani to do this. The irritation with the Pakistanis in Washington has become increasingly more. From General Kayani's point of view, he feels his first loyalty is to his troops, who in many instances question the American alliance, and among the lower ranks, even sympathetic to the militants, and perhaps more sympathetic to the militants than they are to the United States. We don't know precisely where General Kayani is going to come out in the coming weeks, in the sense that he is under tremendous pressure from the United States to take out some militant leaders. And as far as we can see, he is unwilling to do this because he thinks it would be very costly in terms of reprisals from those groups. I think he still wants to continue the relationship with the United States. I think he still wants to accept money from the United States, but on different terms.
The United States gives between $2 and $3 billion a year to Pakistan, some in reimbursement for counterterrorism operations, some to support the military, some in development aid. But the big question is whether or not it makes sense to continue financing Pakistan to that degree while there are so many difficulties in winning Pakistani loyalties. And that's the argument that's going to take place in Congress. Adding to the complications of this are two realities. The first is the United States moves a huge amount of its supplies into Afghanistan through Pakistani territory. That means food, it means fuel, it means ammunition. Until the American presence in Afghanistan is reduced, that need isn't going away. And the second problem is the Pakistani nuclear program. The U.S. has helped finance a covert program in Pakistan to help make sure that those nuclear weapons are safe. But the Pakistanis have never let American officials very close to the Pakistani weapons themselves, or even to the laboratories where they're making so much nuclear material. They fear, of course, that the U.S. would swoop in someday and seize that material or those weapons. And so the U.S. is going on Pakistani assurances that in fact there are sufficient protections built in place. After the successful American raid on bin Laden's compound, a mere 35 miles from the capital of Islamabad, many here and many in Pakistan question whether or not the security around those nuclear weapons is as great as Pakistan has long advertised.
While Pakistan spends about a quarter of its budget on its military, it spends less than 2% on its education system.
One of the basic problems in Pakistan is that the country tends to perceive its threat is coming from the eastern border, from India, and so many of the country's resources are focused on its nuclear capability, on sending troops on the Indian border. But maybe the broadest threat in Pakistan is simply the lack of development and, above all, the illiteracy in Pakistan.
What happened to the desks?
For a country that had done reasonably well since the 1970s, education has just been at a standstill. You travel around Pakistan, you run into ghost schools that just don't exist, or you run into schools where the students have shown up, but the teachers haven't. In that kind of environment, you are going to see continued instability, continued radicalism, and it seems to me that what Pakistan at the end of the day needs for its own security and stability right now isn't more nuclear weapons, it's more schools.